Hi, Stoke, and this is the last episode of my series, House Left Conversations with People Involved in Lansing's theater community, currently or in the past. And tonight we want to talk about hope and truth. I chose this as the last episode of the year because these two things are really important values to me. I feel like I need them right now. I thought maybe others would as well. And so what I did is invite a few of my friends to come on and talk about stories from their um, experience of theater, either in the audience or on stage or backstage or whatever, that represent for them hope and truth. And then I asked for three stories, and the third one can be about hope or truth or hope and truth or anything else they want. So come on the screen, guys. Let's show everybody who you are. There they are. Thank you for coming. Sally Hexsel, I have you up in my upper, I hope it's upper left. I can't tell because things get mirrored and I don't understand which way is which. I know I'm always thinking I'm looking at the right person. I never am on when the recording gets done.
That's okay.
But Sally, you and I have not really done much together on stage. You were in Serious Money, same show I was in, but we never had any scenes together. You've done a ton of shows, a lot of Peppermint Creek recently. The Humans you were in, and Bright Star, right?
Yep.
You got
Yep.
a whole star for that. You were in Eurydice, that was fun. I love that one. Just a lots of shows, Indecent, and I think a lot before that before I even knew you.
Yeah.
So welcome. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right.
Yeah.
Things are a little rocky, but you find escapism where you can,
Yeah.
read, spend time with people, go for walks and all that.
Try some new things with your hair.
Yes, yes.
It looks really great.
Thank you.
In Zurich, you and I have only met on the internet so
Yes,
far. Yeah. How are you doing out in California? Tell us what you're doing out there.
I'm wonderful. I moved out here in 2013, and I am now, unfortunately, not working in theater, but I am a regional manager for a property management company. So I started that in Lansing, home, I've continued that career trajectory here in California. So
Yeah.
loving that.
Yeah, I've loved everything I've seen you in. I saw you in Hairspray. I saw you in Carolina Change playing
Oh,
a
thank you.
dryer and a bus. Um, Very well. And so I'm a fan, and we miss you, and I hope you're doing well up there.
Thanks for having
Jane
me.
Falion goes back to my very, very, very beginning, in my first year of doing theater, Robert Bridegroom. Eventually Little Shop of Horrors, eventually 1776, just lots of shows. My great, great friend. Sometimes think I owe you my life because you got me to do so many wonderful things on stage. How are
Oh,
you?
that's sweet of you.
How are you doing, Jane?
We do go way back.
Yeah, we do. How are you?
I'm fabulous.
Yeah, you too.
Yeah, yeah, I'm wonderful. I've been extremely busy and productive. And at the very beginning of this, I made a list of things I wanted to accomplish, not knowing how long we might be at the beginning and lockdown and stuff like that. And so I've gotten a lot accomplished, and now I'm sort of reevaluating, looking at that list again, adding to that list. I've sort of pulled back. I'm hibernating a little bit since Thanksgiving. I'm not going very many places.
Yeah, me too. But it's been great. So many things have gotten really good for me in this hibernation phase of things.
Yeah, I agree. It's
really
amazing.
creative too. I'm just very, very happy right now for some reason, even though it's all dark and dim out there. And I miss theater desperately, but it's really just, punched some energy into my creativity. So I'm glad to hear that you're feeling that way too.
Yeah, I am.
Yeah. And Matt Ottinger, who everybody in the community theater knows, he keeps track of us in his very special database. On community theater in Lansing. How are you doing, Matt?
Mostly okay, I think. Like Jane, I had some things I wanted to accomplish, and like Sally, I get a little frustrated sometimes at what I don't get to do. I miss so much, even though I don't perform in theater. I miss so much the.
Oh, yes, you do.
Oh, stop it.
You do.
We've been there, Matt. We've seen you do
We've
it.
seen you, and you're great.
But I don't consider let's put it this way. I don't consider myself an actor, but I consider myself an avid fan of theater, which is why I make the database and why I tape the shows. And not having the opportunity to tape the shows, which means not having the opportunity to be at the shows, has hit me pretty hard.
Yeah, I bet it has. Well, it's just that thing, that communal thing that we get, and the fact that we get to come together, for a short defined amount of time with a group of people that we know some of and don't know others, and just the constant dynamic of that is just I miss it so much. So we're here to talk about hope and truth, and I've asked you to just think of some stories. I'll kick off with my first one about hope, and it's a little bit sort of topsy-turvy because it doesn't seem like a hopeful story, but it's the first time I think in my life, maybe there was one other time I had to leave a show, but I had to leave it because before it really got started, and because I got a job somewhere doing a show when I was trying to be a professional actor. But this time, the most recent was Dancing at Lunasa at Over the Ledge. I was doing that with Mary Jobe as a director and a lot of wonderful people. Shannon and Ginny and I can't think of everybody, but we had a great cast, and Joe Dixon was in it as well. And I played a guy who was sick, and I was kind of sick, and I thought, this is going to work. This will be fine. I'm just going to play sick people from now on. But what was going on was I wasn't drinking then. I had been I was 10 weeks sober. But in my process of not drinking, I had developed what's called encephalopathy, which makes you fuzzy-headed and makes it hard to remember things. And it was too much. What's that stuff that you clean windows with?
Windex?
Yeah, too much Windex in my system.
Ammonia?
Vinegar? Ammonia?
Ammonia, yeah. And then there's a drug that works really well to take care of that, but I wasn't able to get it yet. And it was really expensive. So for that period of time, I was just not doing well. And that last night that I was at rehearsal, which was a week before we opened, I came into the wrong scene 3 times. I had read the scene. I was practicing the scene off stage, and so I thought it was done. And so I went into the next scene when actually I was in the first scene that I was just practicing. It was just ridiculous, and I couldn't keep track of anything. It was terrible, and I felt terrible. And but Mary and I had both reached the same conclusion that very same night. If it didn't go well that night, she was going to tell me I had to step back, and I was going to tell her I had to step back. So worked out fine, and I felt nothing but love from everybody. And so why does this give me hope? I don't know. I guess that I don't know, things always come in dualities for me, but the hopelessness of not getting to do the show somehow just gave me hope that I would, especially now when I look back on it, hope that I still can. I still get to do this stuff, and this is just part of the story. It's part of what happens. And it's the ephemeris of theater. It comes and goes, and that's why I'm in theater, and that's why theater gives me hope. I don't know. It doesn't make a lot of sense. So hopefully that starts us out on a keel that you can say anything you want. Who'd like to share your next story? Anybody want to share a story?
I don't necessarily want to share my story, but I want to feed off that a little bit, because during that time period when you were struggling with the acting, as you know, you and I were on a trivia team together.
Right.
We would get together weekly, and it was frightening to us because we could see that you were struggling. And unfortunately, what you're describing, the
encephalopathy.
I was missing a syllable in the middle. Presents
George
itself,
Stephanopoulos.
Yes. But it presents itself as being drunk.
Yeah.
That's what it looks like. And it was a struggle for us to understand what you were going through,
right?
Because we knew you weren't drunk. You weren't drinking.
No.
It was clear that you weren't drinking, but it was still, you were still struggling. And I was so happy to know that you had the diagnosis and the solution. And it's so nice to see you on the other end of that.
Yeah. Thanks.
Awesome.
Appreciate it. But
Awesome.
let's not make this all about me.
So why not?
I'd love to go first and to get my journey
All right.
out of the way.
All right.
And I just want to preface this with that I'm not a storyteller. I will say that, but I'll do the best that I can. So I took a couple notes. If you see me looking down at my screen, just FYI. So I grew up with a bit of a stutter, and it has thankfully improved as I've aged. But it was as bad as when I would attempt to get a word out or a sentence, I would say something, I would try to get a word out like mom, and I'd have to move my hand in order to get the word completely out. And I also grew up singing in church, like a lot of singers do. And that leaned really easily into my liking or taking the love for musical theater. And I moved to Lansing in 2009, actually. And I had heard that there was a musical being done at LCC, and I was a student at LCC at the time. And one of my coworkers, Beth Martin, told me that she was going to go audition for it. And I knew that musical theater involved singing, but I knew that it would involve lines as well, that I just personally could not see myself embarrassing myself or stuttering in front of an entire audience. So I would always just kind of steer away from it, but I really had a strong interest in actually doing it. So the night came where the audition happened, and I unfortunately missed the time to get to the audition because I was just nervous. And I was just sitting in the parking lot of LCC, just waiting to take my chance to go in. So I got myself out of the car. I went into the dance hallway is what I used to call it, where the audition was happening. And I was just pacing by the door where everyone was in there singing and dancing, just deciding if I should go in or not because I'm late. And I just don't want to be that guy that like says like, hey, pick me. I'm gonna be late to rehearsals. So I just continued to pace the hallway. Once I heard that they were dismissing all the auditions, I hid around the corner and waited, but I continued to pace and see if they wanted to talk to me still. So it was John Dale, Janine Smith, and Karen Perry that were in the room. And they were, and Janine happened to catch my eye, and I caught hers, and she happened to peek out the room and just say, hey, were you looking to audition? Can I help you? And I said, yes. So she welcomed me in, and at the time I was obsessed with Hairspray. So I sang Without Love from Hairspray for them. And they all just pleasantly just smiled the entire time as I was singing. And that meant nothing to me because I didn't know if they were like liking it or not. Because in church, people would say, hallelujah, amen. Like they would tell me, give me some sort of signal that I was doing well. And in that audition, unfortunately, I didn't have an inkling of what was going on. So they moved me from that part of the singing. And then Karen taught me, I think, like 2 8 counts. And I had a completely flexed foot the entire time I was performing, and it was just horrible. So I finished singing, and they told me you'll hear back from us in a few days if you are cast. And lo and behold, I got into the cast, and that was a story of hope for me because although so Janine led the musical scenes program at LCC, where she would put together an amazing show with not a ton of dialogue, yes, and with tons of singing. So that was the perfect start for me in my musical theater career in Lansing. There was I think there were a few like very, very small lines in the show, but I realized that when I rehearsed lines, I don't stutter because I'm not thinking off the top of my head and not speaking freely. They're rehearsed and they're in there. I know how I'm going to say it. I know the pace, and I'm good to go. So that was my story of hope.
That's a wonderful story. I love
Fabulous,
that story. Yeah. Oh my goodness, that's a great story to tell people who want to get into theater but are afraid to. I mean, to know that sort of line you have to cross, that courage
Yeah.
you have to take to get there. And
Exactly.
that's
Exactly.
beautiful. What was
Thanks.
the what was the theme that year? The year that
It was a show called Swing City.
Swing
And it
City.
was,
Okay.
yeah, based in the 1920s.
Okay.
And we actually, she had used a lot of music from actually the musical Swing City as
Okay.
well. And the song that I ended up singing that year that actually, I think, for lack of a better term, just I guess put me on the map for other folks just interested me. Was a song
community
called
theater in Lansing.
Yeah, Sophisticated Lady. And it was,
that's a beautiful song. Yeah.
And I recall when she was going down the line auditioning all the guys for it. I was at the very end, and the song starts with they say into your early life. So it goes into that part, and I would hear all the guys like struggle on that into your early life. and I was just really nervous about it. And then when it got to me, I was able to sing it full voice, and she was just like, "That's your song."
I resonate with that too, because my first show, and I'd never done theater in high school or anything. So my first show, I knew I could hit the B flat in Henrik's song because I'd done it in my car, and I knew I could do it. And I had the same thing. Hey, Sally, you want to go next?
Sure.
Okay.
I also have notes because I over prepare for things, but so mine was during Diary of Anne Frank. That show was
incredible.
Blew me away anyways. Thank you so much. Yeah, it meant a lot to be part of it. But this was a story that I was told afterwards. So the dad of a girl that I grew up with is a social worker. His name is Eddie. And he had met with a student who was making anti-Semitic marks. He was drawing like swastikas on his desk. And part of his community service was to come see Diary of Anne Frank.
Interesting.
So he came to the show, and what was told to me is he left in tears. And he had completely had a change of heart. So I guess a big thing for me is that something that makes me hopeful anyways is that this can be something that kind of levels the playing field for people. It can show you like, hey, I'm not so different from this person.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really amazing that we have the opportunity to fundamentally change the way a person views other members of their community in a positive way.
Yeah.
That's crazy to me. But we do have opportunities to do that. I think that's super beautiful. I wish I'd been able to meet this person. But yeah, it's really cool to know that you can directly impact somebody through theater, because I think a lot of times it's like, oh, I loved this show growing up, or like this song like changed the way that I thought musicals could be. But it's insane, and kind of it feels rare to have pieces of art that are like, this changed who I am as a person.
Yeah.
It changed the way I interact with people. It changed the way that I view other people. So that's something that gives me hope. I think that theater can be a really powerful tool.
Yeah, and it's so nice you had this very specific person who had that experience, and you never know how many hundreds of people take whatever they take away. You don't get to know that, which is the beauty of it.
I have had so many really wonderful moments of leaving a piece of theater with whoever I went with, and just sitting in the car and talking for hours and just completely picking apart whatever we just saw. It's really amazing to know that we're able to do that, or has the potential to.
Any of you can comment, it doesn't have to be me always jumping in, but yeah, that's a lovely story.
And I think oftentimes in theater, because we love it so much, I think we tend to forget that we have that power to make a change in someone's life. And we have an opportunity to not only like provoke hope in someone's life, but also inspire. Because it definitely sounds like that's what occurred in that story, Sally. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. Very good. How about you, Matt? You have a tale to tell?
It's different than the stories that Zurich and Sally have told, but when you suggested this as a topic, I thought about it for a long time, and it occurred to me that and I don't mean this to sound negative about me, but I don't tend to operate out of a place of hope, which is to say I'm very much a person in the moment, and I'm not really thinking about what's in the future, positively or negatively. So it's a weird thing for me to come up with a hope thing. But as we're talking about this bizarre climate that we're in now and the horrors of not being able to do theater, I think one of the things that gives me hope is what you incredibly creative people have done to create something. I mean, even this program is an example of something that probably wouldn't have existed if we were just living our lives normally and doing our shows and so forth.
Yeah.
And Jane did one of her original shows as a Zoom exercise. Riverwalk is going to have a delightful holiday cabaret. By the time we're seeing this, it's already happened, but you understand. And there are so many creative things happening given the limitations that we're under. That gives me hope.
Yeah.
I like that.
I like it too. It's you're absolutely right. And what I was talking about earlier before we came on camera, I mean, the creativity that I've felt spurred to have, you know, in this climate has just been lovely. And yeah, I am doing that. I'm writing a lot more than I ever normally did too.
And I've had the opportunity to participate in some of that. And especially we had a delightful little thing we did at Okemos High School where the students all recorded their parts individually, and then we edited it all together to make it look like they were having a dialogue.
Wow.
It was a very challenging thing to do, but it was creatively, it was very satisfying.
Yeah, I don't know how they do that. I mean, I've seen those on TV, and I can't imagine.
Well,
Matt does it, and he does it beautifully.
Well, as a Zoom exercise, it was a challenge.
Yeah,
but it was a fun one.
Yeah, I bet it was. Thanks, Matt. Jane, what did you come up with for hope?
Well, I went down a completely different road here.
Good.
And I do have notes. So my other ones, I had said to Doak when he invited me, I said, you know, I'm not very profound. And so I followed a completely different path. The very first thing that I thought about when I heard the word hope was the lyrics from Chorus Line. God, I hope I get it. I hope I get it. And as a director, I say that to myself all the time. Oh God, I hope I get it.
Not about COVID, I hope.
No. And there was two things that came to mind, and let me backtrack a little bit because Matt was talking about the theater database, which is an amazing resource. And if you don't know about it, you need to go to it. It is fabulous. And before this, I actually went to it because I thought I better look and see what I've done and see where these words kind of fit in and how I can plug it in. So, the first show that I thought about when it came to hope was the 39 Steps. And it was billed as 4 actors, 140 characters, and 104 minutes of hilarity. And I thought, oh, geez, I hope I can make this work. You know, that's a lot to ask. And, and I thought, okay, but first of all, I had a brilliant cast. I had a wonderful cast. I had Joe Bauman and Amy Winchell and Scott Laban and Bob Horosky. And I had the most brilliant stage manager that there is, which is Michelle Boer-Porosky. And she was wonderful. And all of that came together to fulfill that hope that I had. It was a really we talk about the fact that there's usually 2 shows. There's a front of house show and there's a back of house show. And, people will say, oh yeah, it was just crazy backstage. But with the 39 Steps, you literally could have put an audience backstage and watched what transpired. And you would have listened to the play, but you would have seen a play within a play. It was just amazing. So that was just amazing to me that it worked out. And thank goodness it did, I think. And
the 39 Steps was the most fun I've ever had working on a show.
Oh, really?
Because I got to do the sound effects.
That's right.
And there were 167 sound effects.
Wow.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know there were that many.
And anytime I do an acting thing or something else, I'm usually a little nervous about what I'm doing and am I going to get it right? But I was so in my element and I had so much fun. I still remember there was a scene, and Bob used to love to try to catch me. There's a scene where they're all pretending to be in a car and they open doors and slam doors and open doors and slam doors. And I had trigger buttons, one for the sound of a car door. And of course, they're just miming it, but there's a sound of the car door opening and the sound of the car door closing. So I'm just watching them and open, close, open, close. And then Bob would sometimes wait, and like 30 seconds later, he'd close the door and I'd be right there. It was so much fun to work with those 4 people. I just had to say
it was really, really quite extraordinary. It was wonderful. It really was. And you could have watched just what you were doing. You could have watched what people were doing backstage.
That's all I was doing.
Just amazing. You could have watched them change those, into those different characters. It was really fabulous. The other one, and I have you, Matt, to thank for, was the Farnsworth invention. You turned me on to that. You gave it to me and you said, read it and tell me what you think. And the moment I finished it, I got on the phone and I called you and said, I have to do this. Doak, you were in it. And it's a play by Aaron Sorkin. And he is an amazing writer. And his dialogue is just an incredible feast. And I wanted to get it all right. I hoped that I would get it all right. And so I spent the summer before auditions watching all 7 seasons of West Wing, 154 episodes to get it right, to understand it, because his the dialogue is sharp, it's very specific, it is impeccable timing. And I thought, I hope I get this right. Am I going to get the dialogue? Because with Aaron Sorkin, if you've read anything about him or read people that have talked about him being in the shows, you can't change words. You are not allowed to change the words in the script. And I, as a director, honor that anyhow, because I think the playwrights work enormously hard to take something that might take 6 months to happen and condense it to 2 or 2.5 hours. And I believe that they've refined it so much that I don't want people to change words. But with Aaron Sorkin, you have to be so specific. You have to get the timing right, and you've got to get that patter right. And so it was an enormous responsibility, but my cast made it all happen. Hope against hope. They made it all happen, and it was amazing. It was Doak. You were Sarnoff, and you played opposite Joe Bauman as Farnsworth, and then just the rest of the cast was just amazing. It really it made me hopeful, I guess, and it also. At that time, it just kind of gave me the validation I think that I needed, because we all need it. You guys get the applause, directors don't really get that, and so we need to get some kind of validation. And so, yeah, it was definitely hopeful for me.
Very nice.
Let me tell you the prequel to that story. I was in California and needed something to read on the way home, on the plane ride home, and we went to the Samuel French bookstore. There was one; it's since closed, but the Samuel French bookstore on Santa Monica Boulevard, and saw the Farnsworth invention, saw that script, and it's Aaron Sorkin, and it's television. That's 2 things I'm going to like, so I'm going to read that. Got on the plane, started reading, and maybe 3 pages in, I turned to my wife and I said 2 things. One, I said, Jane Falion really needs to direct this. And the other thing I said was, and Doak Bloss really needs to play General Sarnoff.
Yeah.
It was so obvious to me from that moment. In my head, this is the most egotistical I'm going to be tonight. In my head, the Farnsworth invention was my show. I just had you direct it for me.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, it was brilliant. It was a brilliant show. I mean, the writing, Aaron Sorkin, I'm just in love with the man. I seek him out as much as I can to find out what he's doing.
Doke, I think you may be muted.
I'm sorry, what?
Doke's muted.
Oh, he's okay. I think are you still muted, Doke? You are.
Well, this will have to be an edit later.
No,
Can't hear you, Doke.
No. I was wondering if it was just me or not.
Does that help?
That helps.
Yeah,
a
there
lot.
we go.
You're back.
It was turned off. This little thing on the cord that I lean on accidentally. Yeah. Okay.
I have one of those too. I just
Yeah.
wasn't using my headset today.
Yeah, I should know that's what it is because it's happened before. Anyway, my memory of that show, my favorite memory is in the auditions, Joe Bauman and I had a thing of playing like we didn't like each other very much, just in the community and whatever we did. And I think the first rehearsal night, you didn't have many people to play Farnsworth. And so Joe kept getting picked to come up and do the scenes, right? And about the 8th time after he did it, he got up there and smiled. And I said, she's just hoping you'll get it better. Cat Cooper said, well played. Yeah, it was fun. All right, let's move on to truth. Truth. The way, isn't it funny that truth can take you all over the place too? And you like to think of it being one thing. But my truth story comes from The Seafarer, which I did at Peppermint Creek. Story of 5 Irish men, many of them drunk most of the play, and there's a figure who is basically the devil, who comes to get me, my soul, actually, in the course of the play. And there's a game of poker that's played at the end of the play, and there's some business about one of the guys can't see, and well, my brother is blind in the show, played by Rick Dethlefsen, and there's a lot of plot pieces in there, and then the whole second act is like a poker game with a lot of other stuff happening as well, and I lose the game, and because of everybody gets a poker or 4 of a kind in the last hand. And mine is, I think, not the weakest one, but it's like, I think I've won at one point, but then my brother then has an even better, or has 4 of a kind as well. But then the devil guy, Mr. Lockhart, has an even better, he has like 4 kings or something. And so I have to go with him, leave, and my soul is lost. And so we're doing this play, and I loved the play. I loved the moments in it, but it made no sense to me. I couldn't figure out really what was happening in that last scene, especially. I mean, why the 4 cards? Why the because what happened is I'm on the way out the door, and the guy who's lost his glasses and can't see has his glasses back down, and he realizes that the 4 4s he had are actually 4 aces. And so I'm saved. He beats the devil and I'm saved. And I couldn't figure out what, I mean, it just seems like a Deus Ex Machina thing, where he's like, the playwright has just flipped something around. And then I finally realized, it's not because we have to figure out how he thought these 4s were aces, which is almost impossible anyway, because you got the pips on the card, I mean, you would see how much the card was. I realized God changed the cards. I mean, that's what was happening in the script, and I couldn't see that. I couldn't see that that's what he was going for. But once I saw that, it unlocked everything in the whole script. It's like, oh, God's here. And the seafarer is the devil, and he's wandering around trying to like steal people's lives, and God won't let him. He keeps changing things to make him not succeed. And it just changed the whole thing. And I felt this wonderful glow kind of happening in it. I'm an atheist, but it doesn't matter. I mean, the play was just such a beautiful expression of this reality. And so somehow that represents truth to me. It's like this truth of the play came through, and then I had that to hang on to from then on,
I was going to ask you, at what point in the process did
Yep,
you
that was my next
come up with
question.
that?
A week before we opened.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
That late. That
Wow.
late. Now, on Sally, that reminds me of the Humans, because when I did dramaturgy for the Humans, and it was late. I almost turned in the dramaturgy, not realizing something about that play, the whole connection to 9/11, and that your father, that Rick Defelson's character, there he is again. Rick Deffelson had been at 9/11 and thought he lost you, right? Or was it your sister?
My sister.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
Another play where somebody, and I don't think Rick understood it until really close to opening too.
It was a hard show. It was a
Yeah.
hard show to get a
Yeah.
handle on.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. So anyway, that's mine, and anybody that wants to go next can. Truth. We don't have to go in the same order. Whatever you want. Who'd like to go?
Let me just say something. I'll go ahead and go, but let me say something about what you just said, Doug. We've worked together quite often.
Mm-hmm.
And what I find so fascinating about the way you work, and many other actors, but I see it more with you, I see it with Joe Bauman, I see it with, lots of other people, is that there is a point where I watch you as you look at a piece and try to make sense of a piece. And sometimes it comes early and sometimes it comes later. But when you do, you always say something like, oh, I got it. I've been spending time with the script. And you often say to me, it changed everything. It changed how I approached the entire show. And that was just always fascinating to me. Because
I didn't know that.
you do. And then you get it. And then you'll say, oh, you know what? I got it. I now know where I'm going to go with this. And then everything changes about your performance, I think. So it's really interesting.
So it's like a light bulb comes on over my head, and suddenly I realize.
Exactly. Those of you who know me at all know that I really, really love historical pieces. I've sort of settled into those, with Farnsworth and Terra Nova and Gales of November and Parade and even White Christmas and Catch Me If You Can. And then going back, earlier to other shows that I've done as well. I love the dramaturgy of it. I love the research. I love spending hours and hours. And I think actually, Zurich, did you do Hairspray at the Barn Theater or at not Barn, but at the
Riverwalk?
Riverwalk. Yeah, I did that Riverwalk.
Yeah, I was your dramaturge for that. I did all that online stuff for you. Did you do it with Chad? Was it Chad?
We did.
Yeah.
We did it with Chad. It was we would tease him because it was almost like we were in one of his, like we were his students. Because he would take us on a history lesson. It was really cool.
Doing that. Yeah.
That was my very first community theater audition ever.
Wow.
Yes, I did not get it. But that was my first one.
Amazing.
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
Huh.
Wow, I didn't know that either. That's
I'm going to tease Chad the next time I see him that he did not cast Sally Hexsel.
Oh no,
yeah, exactly.
It was right at the time. I was too young.
So I began to think about the as actors and directors, we all have a responsibility to truth, whether that is as an actor or whether that is a director or whether that is in any aspect. We have a responsibility to truth. And I saw that in a really interesting way when I did An Act of Madness. I did it first for the Renegade, Well, it's not first, but I did it for Renegade. And it was something that I co-wrote with Jeff Nash. Doug, you remember Jeff Nash?
Yeah.
And it was about a painful event, that happened, less than only a few miles from here, where survivors and surviving families still lived and still lived the story. And I had a huge responsibility at that point to the truth, because I needed to balance it had to be theatrical. I did it for a competition, so it had to be theatrical enough to win a competition, but I also had to balance that, the horror of that event, with sensitivity to the story itself and how it would affect my audience. And I did it specifically at Renegade because I had done it before as a competition piece with high school students, and we never had a chance to do it for the Bath community. You know, the season ended, school ended, kids were going everywhere and doing everything. So we never really got to share it publicly. And so when I submitted it, I knew that that was my chance to be able to do it. But I was scared to death that what the reaction would be.
Sure.
Yeah, because it was, they lived the story, they knew the story. It's part of the whole fabric of the Bath community. I invited some of the Bath survivors or people from the surviving families to come and be my talkback speakers at the end. I'm not a big talkback person. I don't really like that. But with this particular show, it was really important, I thought. And a lot of the people in the audience were from the Bath community as well. And so, and I was so fearful that I wouldn't get it right, you know, that I would not be 100% accurate. And I assume I did because I got a lot of good feedback. And then I was invited. We were invited 2 times to come to Bath and perform it. And we did. We performed it in the Methodist Church next to the site of where the school was and where the bombing was. But it was that responsibility to the truth really weighed heavily on me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a very journalistic kind of show too. I mean, it really tells you the facts. That's what it does. Nice, thank you.
Very nice.
Anybody? Okay.
I'll go off that because it's still going to relate to Jane.
Yeah.
I'm glad she didn't specifically mention what I was going to talk about. First Broadway show I ever saw, not on Broadway, the Civic Coliseum in Knoxville, Tennessee. I'm 12 years old, and it's not a very 12-year-old person show, but it was 1776. I know. The second show I saw that same season was You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. You would think at the very least those would have been reversed. But 1776 was the first show I saw. I'm maybe 12 or so. And it made an impact, and it always remained one of my favorite shows. And it was something that the people that knew me knew I was a big fan of 1776. I had been recording the shows for Riverwalk and for other places for a few years. And Bill Helder, the great Bill Helder, called me one day and said, I've got 2 things to tell you. One, Riverwalk is going to do 1776 next season. And the other thing is you're really going to like the director.
Oh, that's nice.
He did. That's what he said. That's what he told me.
Wow.
And because he knew that this was my show, and he knew if I was ever going to get on stage, it would be for that show. And I did. And I auditioned for Jane, and she gave me the part that I wanted. It's a small but very pivotal part. It was just a perfect thing for me to do. I got to meet Doak. It was a sensational experience.
Yeah. We made up together. We did our makeup beside each other.
And we traded theater stories, and he would throw trivia questions at me. It was the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
Well, you know, Bill Helder was responsible also for me doing 1776. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
He said to me, I was looking for a show to do. And I knew it was funny because Doak, we ran into each other at
Take Me Out.
Yes, at Take Me Out at Waldemar.
Yep.
And we hadn't seen each other for years and years, and we had not done shows together. And you had, and it was really funny because we were from like sort of that old group of people that were, you know, from years ago. But we had been out of theater locally, community-wise, for a really long time because I had moved into a high school where I was doing a lot of theater there. And I remember we were talking to each other, and I said, I really want to do this one show, but I don't think people really know know me, and it required a lot of men. And so I was talking to Bill Helder about that, and he said you should do 1776, which I absolutely loved. But I don't know if you saw it, Doug, but remember when they did it down at the Capitol?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I saw it.
It was incredible. It was a fabulous show. And I said to him, I can't do 1776 because it was done. It was done here, and it was done brilliantly. And he looked at me and he said, Jane, He said that was like 20 years ago. And I went, maybe even 25 years ago.
I think it was 30 actually.
My age. And so
Yeah.
I said, oh, I guess I can do it. So yeah. And so yes. And then Matt, and he had told me, he says, you need to cast him as the preacher.
Which
and that was not what you were interested in. And I'm glad that you made that clear too. So yeah.
Okay.
The truth part of the story, and I took you very, very literally. It was such a favorite of mine. It was one of those rare scripts that was actually released in a mass market paperback. So I had a paperback of the script.
Oh, okay.
And the back of the script had an addendum by the authors. It's like maybe 10 pages, but it's all the stuff that was factually true that they had inserted into the show that we don't know because we hear the cardboard cutout stories. The fact that John Adams was disliked, the fact that it was a hot summer in Philadelphia and the flies were getting in, all of these little details that they put in the show, they explained in the back of this paperback that they were absolutely true facts. Same with some of the other shows that Jane's talked about. The Farnsworth Invention was full of very specific true facts. Now, there were liberties. There are always liberties taken when you take an historical work and turn it into something on the stage. But the fact that I can learn what, for the lack of the better word, is trivia, but I can learn interesting things that are true in these, what are at the end of the day fictions, has always been fascinating to me.
Yeah. Isn't it sad that true facts is no longer a redundancy? We actually have to
I could have easily prefaced this by saying, especially in the world we're living in today. Where,
now we have alternative facts as well as true facts. Okay, let's let the younger people take us back. This is their generation.
Take it away.
Sorry for the Matt Doak and Jane show going on over here.
Oh, you're fine. I have to know. So Sally, not to bring up or open up an old wound, but did you come to see Hairspray?
I was devastated. So no, I did. I was in high school. I was like maybe a junior, but Claire Brennan was playing Amber, and she was one of my good friends. So I was so happy for her, but I was like, I couldn't possibly go see this.
Okay, sorry, you can bring it up again. I was just curious.
I've been there. I know that feeling.
So my story of truth involves Hairspray as well, and actually it involves Hairspray when I actually moved to California. So my entire time in Lansing, I had done shows or been a part of shows that didn't have a ton of dialogue. So Smokey Joe's Cafe, all of Janine's shows. I also did, obviously Carolina Change was completely all the way through. So this was my first time stepping out and actually using my voice, not in a melodic way. And it was frightening, but also really exciting because, as I mentioned earlier, Hairspray is like just my absolute favorite show, just period. So I saw the audition for it on Facebook here in Sacramento, and I saw that it was in a suburban part of town here called Roseville. And as you know, Hairspray is a very diverse show, and it's about racial inequalities, and we need a strong cast of African Americans as well as a strong cast of whites. And the part of town that I did the show in, I was not aware at the time that we didn't have a huge African American population. So going back to my kind of audition story is, I remember walking into the theater, and I walked in, turning my paperwork in, and then when I walked into where everyone else was, the entire judges table did an audible sigh of relief where they were just like, okay.
Oh no.
And it was funny to see that, because it just made me wonder, in a suburban area where you don't necessarily have the population to do a show that calls for a specific type of cast, it just made me question, like, obviously they were very hopeful that they could tell the truth of the story, but it was interesting to see that they decided to do it where they did it. So I ended up auditioning. I found out that night that I was cast as Seaweed, and I was and it was interesting because I'm used to auditioning and then waiting and then or maybe possibly waiting for a callback and coming back in. But I right before I left, they called me back up to the table and told me they wanted me to play seaweed. And then they also said, "Do you have any other friends?" It was interesting. I was able to tell my truth and be my true self by using my full self, acting, singing, and dancing throughout the entire show. Because as you know, the show has tons of dialogue in it as well. But that's my story of truth.
That's wonderful. Yeah, and I think I mean, just the whole phenomenon of a community that is largely white doing that show and hoping Black people show up is an interesting thing. But I understand also that I mean, I think in the production in Lansing, I heard that I mean, you had a night where the truth got told, or that the white folks got a little bit of an understanding of some of what it might feel like to be a Black person. I think Chantel Hamilton was a part of that, a big
she was.
that. But I think it's so it's just so interesting to do that show and then have a moment where, okay, tell us what it's like to be Black, you know.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
It's like with me, tell us what it's like to be gay. Well, I'm only one gay person. I can't really go with the whole thing, but that's great.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, Zurich. Sally.
Okay, so my truth story is rooted in the Wild Party. I was cast as ensemble in the Wild Party that we did in 2018.
That sounds about right. Yeah, I saw it.
It all meshes together. I have no idea when shows happen.
Ben Cassidy directed it.
Yes.
Right.
So I was ensemble for that. It was final dress. We were opening the next day, and our lead just stopped singing halfway through the first act.
Oh,
we were kind of like, okay, what's going on?
Right.
She went to urgent care after, and they kept me. And they were like, we just want you to look at a couple of numbers just in case something happens. So I stayed at the theater until 2 a.m. I had to work at 6 o'clock the next day. We get a call from our lead. She has viral laryngitis. The doctor's recommending that she not sing for a week at least. I think that is pretty much every actor's like nightmare of like being thrust onto a stage and not really knowing what's going on. And that was my reality. So I went to sleep. I slept fitfully. I was locked away in the office at my job the next day, like frantically typing notes and trying to like break down this character that I didn't understand. I hadn't done any work on. I got to the theater. I rehearsed for maybe 8 hours, and then we opened and did the show. So when I was pulling the story together, I was looking at synonyms for truth, and it was things like honesty and sincerity. And so because I had no time to work on this character, I had to like, the control freak in me kind of just had to let go and be like, I guess I'll see what happens. We never made it to the second act. In my rehearsals, my character was off stage for all of the second act. So I was just like, I literally have no idea what's going to happen. So I really, really, really had to trust everybody on stage with me to make this happen. I was sewn into costumes. They plopped me down. They like put a bunch of makeup on my face and they were like, go, like, go ahead. And I just remember being backstage and I was on the verge of tears. Cameron Going, who was playing opposite of me, like squeezed my hand and went on stage, and I was just like, this is going to be a subpar performance. This is not going to be what I put out. This will like tarnish my reputation or something ridiculous like that. But I really had to surrender. I had to understand that everybody around me, including the audience, wanted me to succeed. And it was just this revelation of like truth of like what theater could be like. And I understand that Wild Party is not a story for everybody. I know plenty of people who hate it, and I understand why they do.
Well, it is a wild show too, which really, yeah, which I sort of fits your situation.
Yeah. But it was one of those moments on stage that felt almost holy, in the sense that it is so pure and authentic, and you are so in the moment because there's no other way to be. And that is like the truth of what theater can be for an actor. So like we talked kind of about what it could be for the audience, and this is what I think it can be for an actor, because we were like laser focused. We were so in sync with each other. There was one song that I just could not get the lyrics of. It was fast paced. It was a mouthful, and I jumbled over something, and Rachel Raymer came in and she picked me up and she just started singing the lyrics until I knew where I was again. And I was just like, thank you.
Wow.
Thank you so much.
Wow.
And that's what they needed. Like, I'm living with the person who stage managed that show right now, and we were kind of talking about it. And she was like, everybody was there for you. Like, everybody wanted this to happen for you. If you didn't know where you were, they were going to guide you where you needed to be. If you dropped a line or a lyric, they were going to pick it up for you. So
That's that embodies so many things about why theater is what it is. I mean, the fact that the entire cast as an organism had to kind of come together and be with you in your drama, you know, and also be especially on and aware of everything that was happening for you. That's
we were trying to rely on tech. My mom's an audiologist, and she had these hearing aids that she was going to try to program to a phone so someone could literally sit backstage and feed me lines. But it was like out of range, so it was like my hopes were dashed. I was like, there's this really like elegant solution to this.
Oh my
and
God.
like, well, I'm just gonna have to trust people and try to come out of this unscathed and not cry on stage.
Well, I mean, I forgot that. I forgot that aspect of the show. I knew it when it happened, and I was just blown away because you were brilliant. I mean, you were wonderful. I don't know when in the run I saw it. Maybe you'd had a few shows before then, but by then, but yeah, it was an amazing thing that you did that. And
thank you.
And gosh, that's the immediacy of everybody else comment. That's so much in that story.
I'm so glad you told that particular story because I saw you that first weekend. That's when I went with my camera, and I don't know whether it was Ben or Chad who told me what had happened. And when I learned, it wasn't until after I did not. I asked why is Sally doing this? I don't understand. But then they said that you had just gotten the word. I mean, literally that close to the show. I mean, this time you'd had 2 or 3 whole days, but whatever. But now to know that your castmates and everybody around you was so supportive is magnificent. But I was just simply going to say, in 20 years of taping stuff, knowing that you did that is one of the most impressive things I've ever seen.
That's amazing.
And they didn't they just announced at the top of the show, they're like, tonight the role of Queenie will be played by Sally Hexsel. I was like, tell them that I don't know what I'm doing because then they'll understand. Like, they were like, no, we're not going to do that. You're going to be fine. But I had worked with Brennan Hathaway in Rent. I'd worked with Carly Jacobs in Rent. I'd worked with Cameron Going in Jekyll and Hyde. And I feel like there's one more person that I'm missing, but maybe not. These leads were people who I like truly considered friends. And I was like, I trust you with my life. I know that I will be taken care of.
And I imagine Ben was also really good in that situation.
Oh, absolutely. It was like, what do you need? We were taping lyrics on balconies. We were taping lyrics inside of like bathtubs.
Wow.
There were lyrics written on tape on the stage. Like there was crap everywhere. It was insane.
You and Ben were engaged then, right?
Yes.
Yes.
A very long engagement. We were still engaged.
I think that speaks volumes for the truth of an actor. I think the truth of the entire theater community, as well as the entire theater audience as well. Because no matter what, you're going to be embraced. And that's something that I realized and made me so grateful for taking the leap and just auditioning for that first show. It's just because you find so many friends that you just trust with your life, just because you have to rely on each other so heavily when you're in a show. And I just think that speaks truth to all 3 of those categories. So amazing story. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. And it must set you up to think, you can do anything if you got through that.
Yeah, it was extremely validating. It was like, oh, I'm more capable than I thought I was. Like that's news to me.
My only memory of a story like that was Take Me Out, the show that Jane mentioned earlier. That was the first show I did in a long time. The baseball show about a gay baseball player, and the second week of the run, Louis Balestra's nephew had died in New York, and he was one of the lead characters, a gay guy who gets fascinated by baseball through this story. And so we came to the theater that night and found out he was gone, and Chad, the director, was going to take over the part. They thought through several options, and he said he was going to do that. And I immediately got really excited. Everybody else in the cast backstage was going, "Oh my God, oh no, this is going to be awful." And so, what are you doing? This is the most exciting night we've had. I mean, we all have to be aware of this, and just like I'm sure the people in your cast just marshaled their strength to be behind you. You're all just on and you're aware, and it's true. Yeah, that's a great truth story.
There's a palpable dynamic change within the cast.
Yeah.
Like you can feel the energy shift, and we just settled, like we immediately settled into it.
Yeah.
I've never experienced anything like it before. It was
got chill bumps.
wonderful and insane.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
We should have saved that one for last, Sally. That was really good.
I have another story. We're getting a little dramatic. I have some more.
Well, yeah, and we're going to tell the third story in a moment. And also, I'm going to ask you a question to answer when you come back. I'm going to send you off and just take a few to think about the question I'm going to ask you. Just I'll say a few things and then you'll come back in. But the question I want you to think about, in addition to telling your third story, which can be about hope or truth or something else, is if you were to put together this episode of this show, I mean, what value, what thing, what emotion, instead of maybe hope or truth, would you want to focus on? Because that's the thing that theater really embodies for you. It's what theater gives you in your life, so I just want you to think about that, see what comes up, and we'll do the stories, and then we'll have a little confab on that as well. Okay, so if you could all just step into that mystery land where your pictures aren't seen for a second, and here we go. Okay, all I want to say here while they all go think about that is I hope you stay tuned, even though this is the last regular kind of dialogue show I'm doing this year. I hope to do some more next year. Got lots of good ideas and lots of people that want to do things. So hopefully I'll have the energy, and we'll do that sometime late January, February, get that started again. But in the meantime, I have 25 people lined up to play in my great theater trivia tournament. 25 people that are going to play in an elimination match, kind of series of 8 shows where I ask trivia questions. They'll be funny, they'll be goofy, they'll be real, some general knowledge type stuff too as well. But I think it'll be a blast because we'll have 5 people in each game, and then the top scorers, and that will move on to the next level into the semifinals and the finals. We did this qualifying test in advance, and I thought this is going to be dry and stupid. I just wanted to have some way to figure out who the 25 people would be. So I did this test of like 16 questions, multiple choice, did it on Zoom, not recorded. And it was like a party on my computer. It was so much fun. Everybody, Joe Quick out in Texas was like seeing people he hadn't seen in a long time, and everybody was just like connecting and laughing and joking. It was fantastic. So I can't think that the episodes are going to be even any less entertaining than that. So I'm really excited for it, and they will air. They will go on YouTube premiere I think in the week between Christmas and New Year's. I'll do the 5 semifinal rounds, and I hope you'll tune in for that. Everybody else, come back. Shane, come back. Here we are, and we're in a different order. Isn't that fun? That's fine. Okay, so the last one I said you could talk about truth or hope or anything you want, and mine goes way back into like one of the earliest shows I did. It was Sweeney Todd in Dart Auditorium. It was back in the day when when LCC was doing like enormous shows, spending a ton of money, and it was like a community theater. It really wasn't like about the education of students as much as it was about a community theater with big spectacle. And Bob Burpee, the late Bob Burpee, was the director, and it was an enormous show. beautiful cast, long nights getting it together and making it work. But we played Toby, the little knave that ends up being Mrs. Lovett's friend, and who Mrs. Lovett double crosses, and I end up discovering she's murdering people and he's murdering people. Sweeney Todd is murdering people, and I come out in the last scene from the darkness of the basement where all the bodies are and everything, and Todd has just killed his wife, and spoiler alert, by the way. And I come out and my hair is all turned white, and I'm nuts, I'm crazy, and I walk onto the stage and I say a couple of nursery rhymes, and Todd is sobbing over his wife, and I pick up the knife that he has killed everybody with, and everybody knows what's going to happen, that I'm actually going to slice Todd's throat. And that moment of, I mean, the whole show has this tension built into it, and you know that by the cutting of his throat, I am breaking some huge big tension. It's like released finally, because Todd is, it's over. I mean, it's over. And the power I felt in that moment of that quiet, enormous theater, and this is back in the day when that theater was filled with people coming to see shows, as all the theaters were. It was just such a, oh God, it's like the tension in the moment was just so powerful. And I don't mean powerful in the negative way of power over or power to, you know, decide who can do what or can't do what, but the power of theater and of the emotions of the moment, and this quiet thing that is so deep, and then doing it, and it's like, I thought, boy, this is fun. And I could see myself standing there in that stage and doing that. And probably it wasn't anywhere near that exciting to anybody in the audience. But for me, I felt really powerful. And it was a great experience. So who'd like to go first in this final round of our stories? And you're all doing really wonderful. Thank you for sharing your stories.
Mine is probably going to be the fastest, so I'll tell it real quick and I'll go. I thought about, I'm not sure if you want us to answer your question now or later, but
no, we'll do that later if that's okay.
Okay, perfect. So this is a story of when I pushed a boundary that I thought I had drawn a line for myself, and it involves one of the musical directors from when I did Hairspray here in California, creating a show that it was called Stray Camp. And the show was about a kid who was supposed to be sent to a camp for, I think it was for bad behavior, but he was mistakenly sent to a gay camp, and it was a completely satirical piece, and it was a musical as well, obviously, and the character that I played ended up being a drag role. And I feel as though I try to present as a very strong person, particularly from being from Detroit. I felt like that's what I've always had to do, and I just always told myself that I probably never wear heels, or never wear a dress, or never do anything like that. Although I am a gay male, that's where I drew the line for myself. And the musical director of the show told me that he had written a song specifically for me in the musical, and that obviously made it really hard to say no. So I mean, once I had a chance to hear the song, I completely just dragged out. I went shopping for shoes, shopping for a dress. I rehearsed the song completely. I paid someone to do my makeup so I can have a trial run on it. Like again, it just speaks to the beauty and the value that theater brings to our lives, because it just pushes those boundaries that we think we have. And I mean, it ended up being probably one of the most favorite shows that I've ever been a part of. And just I I was a girl in the show, so I would come out of the female entrance, but I was clearly like a very strong representing man. It was a great show to be a part of, and it just speaks volumes to just what theater can do.
Yeah.
When you just fully commit. So
yeah, and the fun of trying that on, that's great. I got to do that in Hair actually, way back, right before Sweeney Todd. Bob Burpee cast me as Margaret Mead, the character who sits in the audience for a third of the play, with her husband, and then gets up and interrupts the play and comes on, and it's revealed that it's a man and she's in drag, but it was so much fun. It really, I understand you're tripping out on that, because it was just such a blast to try that on. It was just fun. So thank you, Zurich. I love that story. Who's next?
I'll go. Mine's even shorter because
Okay.
I've had so many fewer experiences on stage than the rest of you. In fact, just last year I got to be in Something's Afoot. It's the most ridiculous, silly farce of a silly farce. It's just no thought, no deep meaning, no anything.
Right.
But it was the first show that I'd worked on in any real capacity, not just acting, but in any real capacity, with somebody other than Jane. And that was interesting to me.
Yeah.
And it was both, and it became both my truth and my hope, because the truth was, it was different, and I had not experienced different before. I don't want to use the word but. I don't want to say it was different, but it was different and I enjoyed it. And now I'm a little hopeful for things in the future. I'm talking to some directors who say, I'm thinking about doing this show, and there's a part in here that you might want to play.
Nice.
No one's ever said that to me before. So that's not that I would necessarily want to jump in with both feet at my age, but I think there's some chances for me to be back on stage again, because I did Something's Afoot. And that's kind of exciting.
Why not at your age? There's no
Why not?
Yes.
Younger than
You were
you.
great
Nothing
in
to do
this
with it.
show. I loved it.
I had fun. It was a fun show. I didn't have to think about my character or worry about motivation or anything.
I remember you coming to trivia night and telling, I had this actor thought, I realized I did this thing as an actor.
Like, oh my goodness.
I did this and they did something different. It was very fun. Great. I'm glad to hear that, Matt. Okay.
I can go next.
Okay.
So for me, this was Eurydice at Peppermint Creek.
Great show.
Thank you.
It was a very good show.
It was a very painful show for me. So this would again be finding hope and truth in the people supporting you. So the plot of Eurydice is based on the Orpheus-Eurydice myth. So Eurydice and Orpheus get married, she dies, but then we kind of follow Eurydice's path. So she goes to the underworld. She goes through the river of forgetfulness, I think they call it in this rendition. And her dad finds her down in the underworld. He teaches her to read again. He teaches her to remember. They rekindle their relationship with one another. It's very pure and wholesome. Orpheus comes down to the underworld to get Eurydice back. She follows him. Her father's devastated, so he dips himself in the river to forget, because it's too painful. There's a deal that's made where if she follows him up without him turning around to see that she's following, they can go free. It's a tragedy. So he turns and he sees her, and she has to go back down, and she has to go back through the river. My dad was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer while I was working on Eurydice. So I was grappling with what it would be like to lose my father in reality while trying to work on this show that dealt so deeply with a father-daughter dynamic, which dealt with losing loved ones. There's loss and grief in that. And it was so overwhelming and visceral sometimes. I had Jeff Berger there with me, who has been like the most incredible paternal figure. My dad passed away in 2018. So I have all of these like theater dads who come and they check on me and they make sure I'm doing okay. But I just remember there was a moment in the show where Eurydice goes down and she realizes that her father has no idea who she is anymore, that he's forgotten her. And she, no matter how hard she tries, she can't reconnect with him. And I just remember like the overwhelming sense of loss and devastation. It just totally like blindsided me. But everyone was so patient, and they picked me up and they let me grieve while we were working. They gave me all the time that I needed. Yeah, and I think that was the last show that I did before he passed away. I didn't let him see it because I was like, I don't think this would be good for either of us. I don't think it would be good for me to know that you were there, and I don't think it would be good for you to leave the hospital to come see this. But yeah, it was very hard, but it's one of those shows that I really treasure. The timing was just so bizarre.
Right.
You know.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
I wouldn't ask this of everybody, but I think it's okay to ask you this.
Mm-hmm.
That phenomenon of doing a play, which in some ways artifice, but we find truth in it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And having a true thing happening to you outside of the play that is so much like it, or it resonates so much with it. Can you describe what that's like for you? And the fact that, I mean, 'cause I think it's hard to understand unless you've gone through it, that it's not reality, it's not pretending, it's somewhere in between. And it touches what's true inside you, because I think every probably emotion you had must have been touched, having that experience of going through that in your life with your father, who I know you loved, and then having to do that on stage as well. Could you just say a little bit about that, if you don't mind? You don't have to.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think that a lot of times actors work on a spectrum of experience, or a spectrum that's within themselves. Like I played Mimi Marquez in Rent, and it felt like I had no similarities to her, but there are pieces of who you are fundamentally that you can kind of lean into. So it was one of those things. But the thing that was so hard with Eurydice is it is very hard to separate the reality that you're living and the reality that you're trying to portray when they feel so close together. But you have to compartmentalize, because it wasn't like I could just have like a gut-wrenching meltdown halfway through the show and like be completely inconsolable backstage. You have to. Fortunately, any time that I was really overwhelmed by emotion was in rehearsal. We got into a rhythm enough, and I was able to communicate what I needed. If I was like, hey, I need 10, I need to go sit down for a second. Or if it's like, hey, I need to leave rehearsal early because we're having family grief counseling. It's like, I needed to take care of what was going on outside as best I could. I think it timed out right, because he didn't decline until later in the year, and I did turn down shows at that point. I had committed to a show, and I ended up backing out of it before we had started the rehearsal process. So I think it's just one of those strange kind of Twilight Zone moments, but you have to create boundaries within that. You have to be able to lean on the people around you, and you have to be vulnerable and trust them to understand as best they can. I guess I don't know if I answered your question completely.
Well, there is no right answer. I just wondered what you would say, because I resonate with a lot of what you're saying, and I think it's kind of important to understand. I've especially found that people who are really good actors have the capacity to do that separation and to derive healthy benefits from it. I mean, I would suspect you got something out of that, even though it was somewhat traumatic, that you had a place to practice some emotions or let some emotions come through in a way that wasn't touching right to the bone, you know?
Sure. Yeah, I think that was a good way to process grief in a healthy and constructive way. And I was working with, an amazing cast. I was with Michael Boxleitner again, who I love so much. I any chance I have to be on stage with that guy, I will take in a heartbeat. I don't
Cool.
care what the show is. But so it was Veronica Gracia Wing, it was Connor Kelly,
Right.
Jeff
Oh,
Berger,
yeah. These are good
Ace
people.
Sartorius, yeah, Angie Dill. I had just the most wonderful cast.
Yeah.
It's almost like the universe knew what to send to you to
Yeah,
prepare you.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Theater can be very healing. It's
Yeah.
in very weird ways.
Mhm.
And I think I even have a segue into Jane's story, because one of the things you said was that, you know, you find the thing inside yourself. I mean, that's the thing for me that I realized that acting wasn't pretending, that acting was about finding the truth. And what I had to do was find something in myself that always connected to the character, that was real in the character, and then build up from that, as opposed to putting something on. It's like getting naked and then putting something, building up from it. And when I played Goat, this halfwit in the Robert Bridegroom, which is a show that's never done anymore because it's got violence toward women built into it, that is unfortunate. But very funny show back then. And I played this halfwit, and at the same time I was in just starting grad school. My one semester of grad school, I had a free ride in creative writing at MSU, and I hated every minute of it. And it was everybody talking about the literature like it was a science, and you know, you had to read the criticism of the criticism of the criticism, and I just hated every minute of it. I didn't know what anybody was talking about. And that's what I realized Goat was like. Goat was, he didn't understand anything anybody was saying ever. And so I took that piece of my grad school, you know, ignorance and sort of bafflement, and put that into the character, and it worked really well.
It did.
And it was
really
fun. It was a fun way to play out that piece of my life, you know, a much more comic and less, you know, real thing than you went through, Sally. But it's a thing that I think it really helps to do that. And yeah. So Jane, you get the last story.
Well, I'll try to make this quick. You know, we've all talked a lot tonight about the power of theater and what it does for our audiences. You know, how physically we see an audience react. You know, and it goes a little bit back to the responsibility that we have. At least I feel that I have as a director. You know, to do that. But there was a show that I did where you could have cut the emotions with a knife. It was so unbelievable, and it just taught me again what my responsibility as a director is. It was a show called The Diviners, and it was about a boy who was terrified of going into the water. He had ringworm, and he had to wash, but he wouldn't go in the water to do that. And his mother had drowned in the water as well. And into their little rural Indiana town came a backsliding preacher. The town didn't have a preacher, and they wanted him to become their preacher. So the church was very, very persistent. But during the story, we meet this character. C.C. Showers was the preacher, and he made friends with Buddy Lehman. And at the very beginning of the show, in what was called the first elegy, we are told through two characters that Buddy Lehman is going to die. And it's told several times in beautiful, beautiful language. I looked at it again today and just went, wow. So we tell our audience that he's going to die. We watch the progression of this friendship. We watch his trust in Cece, and he finally gets him down to the river, and he dies, he drowns, and we see that on stage. And then we have a second elegy, and once again, we tell our audience that Buddy Lehman has died, and that he's not with us anymore, our two characters. And one of the lines was, Buddy Lehman's dead, don't you see? And at the end of the show, when the lights went down, I would say that there was a good 15 to 20 second absolute silence. Well, not absolute, because there were people that were crying, and there were people that were making, you know, like they were emotional, and you could hear them make that, but there was no applause for 15 to 20 seconds. And it took that long for the audience to pull it together because they were so devastated. Even though we had told them at the beginning he dies, in the middle we see it, and at the end he dies. You know, we tell them again that he's died. I walked away and said, whoa, that's a lot of responsibility, you know, and it's a lot. You could cut it with a knife. It was chilling, it was thrilling, but it also was sobering as well.
That's, yeah. I had one of those too in Women of Lockerbie. We had one night
Yes.
where we came out for the curtain call and nobody applauded at all. The lights came up,
Yeah.
the lights went down, and we went backstage and we just went nuts. We were so happy. It was like people thought we'd be upset. No, that was just wonderful.
Those are like really beautiful and gratifying moments where you're like, oh, we did our job right. Like
Exactly,
we did
yeah.
everything we were supposed to do here.
Yeah.
That's such an interesting device too. The like explaining to your audience what's going to happen, and that they still are so willing to follow that story, that they're willing to be invested in these characters.
Yeah.
It's so interesting.
And I would think it would be so much harder in a drama to gauge that the audience is with you than it would be in a comedy or a musical where they're applauding after every number, or they're laughing at the jokes.
Yeah.
With the drama, you don't have any immediate connection to the audience as it's going, that they're with you on this ride. And
other than the nature of the silence.
The nature of the silence, if you're able to pick that out, that's impressive.
I asked my husband, is a pianist, and I asked him, do you have anything like that? Because you don't get applause in the middle of, or laughter in the middle of your performing. He said, no, but I can hear it. I can hear when people are listening. I can hear the silence.
Oh, wow.
So
Impressive.
So I think that's true.
I think when you're doing dramas like that, you kind of fine tune what to expect from the audience. You're like listening for inaudibles. You can feel the energy when they're with you or when they're not with you.
Right.
It's a lot more subtle, but I think it's a really interesting part of being an actor.
Yeah. And we always blame it on the audience, and it's not their fault. It's us. What a terrible audience. No, I think it's us.
We had a bad night.
Okay, guys, we've been way over, and that's fine. What is your core sort of thing that theater brings to your life that you came up with as I ask you that question? Anybody? I'll let you go in any order you want.
Color. It's not an emotion, but maybe it should be.
Yeah.
When I go to see a show, I mean, I'm big on the superficial. I'll freely admit that. I didn't know that I would be able to hang with you guys tonight. I like color. I like to be thrown into something that is fun, and it can be serious and still be fun. But I love that theater gives you a reality that's different from your everyday. And sometimes that's literally in the musicals. You think of Joseph in his dream coat, or
you in your sweaters.
The Colors of My Life from Barnum, another one of my favorite shows. Guys and Dolls. I think, Zurich, you were in the Guys and Dolls once, weren't you?
I was.
What's one of my favorite shows? Because that's just nothing but color. It's just such a fun show to see. And to me, there's room in talking about theater to talk about just how much fun it is as an audience member.
I think it's great.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And just to piggyback off of that, I would just go back to saying that theater has really given me the gift of pushing my boundaries, whether it be physically in drag or whether it be mentally closed off to an idea that an audience has just convinced me is true, or an idea that I was closed off to in the past that I'm now open to. So I would say just the overall ability to push my boundaries and just open up my thinking.
Yeah. You guys are great. These are great answers. Color, boundaries. What else we got? Sally, you want to go next?
Yeah. So I don't know how to distill this into one word, but theater was always my hyper focus. I was a kid growing up with ADD. I was a figure skater for 8 years. I was trash in school. I didn't have anything that I was really good at, where I really felt like I was in my element, where I could really like channel my ADD into something, until I was really into theater. Like I remember doing Room with a View at Lansing Community, and I was like, oh, this is my hyper focus. I can memorize pages upon pages of dialogue and it's no problem. Like, just realizing like there is a place where I can channel this thing that has always been a weakness for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know, you reminded me of a story that Curran Jacobs, that beautiful young man who was a star at MSU a few years back. He was Stanley Kowalski. He was Rocky in Rocky Horror Picture Show, but he's a big, he's into like professional wrestling type stuff now, not the fake kind, but the real kind. He said, he wrote one time on Facebook that he was always a mess in school. He was just never focused. And a teacher took him out of his class one day and said, okay, you have two choices. You can keep doing this and you can come out every single class and sit in the hallway like this, or you could take a theater class. And he took a theater class and his life changed completely because he found that thing. So I think that your story about that is not unique, Sally. I think it's true for a lot of people. Thank you.
Yeah.
Jane?
You know, power.
Okay.
Power.
Yeah.
But it's not power in terms of having power over people. It's having the power to create. I tend to see, I have a visual film in my head of what a show is going to look like at the end. You know, I mean, I can see it. It goes through my head. And, you know, when I was in high school, I'm from New York. And so I saw tons of theater and I did lots of theater, but it was always on the fringe. And it wasn't until I actually directed something that light bulb went off and it went, oh my God, this is it. And it changed my life completely, you know, because as a director, I had done lots of backstage stuff. I had done small roles here and there, but the power to be able to take a thought in your mind and a vision in your mind and work through it so that at the end, you see what was in your head is incredibly powerful. It was just, it's just, and it just changes everything. And it opened that whole creative avenue in my life that I realized that I was creative, I hope, and that I can be creative. I mean, it was like a huge release. Yeah.
And you're great fun to be directed by too, Jane. I mean, because of that, because you have this kind of encompassing view of things and know what you want. And I feel very fortunate to have been directed by you several times because you provide that. Yeah. Well, guys, this was really wonderful. I'm really glad we did this for the last episode of the season, and to have it with two people that I know pretty well, and two that I don't know as well, and I feel I know much better now. Thank you so much. Stay safe through this winter. I heard on today that maybe in a year from now, things might actually be sort of normal again. So we may have another year of this, but another year of masks.
Knock on wood, yeah.
That's all right. You know, we're all still here, and you guys are beautiful. Thank you so much for doing this. Okay.
Thank you.
Right.
This has been fun.
Wave goodbye to the audience, and I will stop the recording, and we'll go on. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.